This is a culmination of all the theories and bad ideas I had before Sumeru. As a tale of the Sub-Zero samsara comes to a close, you can't help but wonder about the sages' motivations in doing all of this. Or maybe not even just the sages, but also the Eremite factions in housing an illegal Scarlet Knowledge Capsule, or even just as suspicious burning Irminsul in the trailers. Well, today let's theorize on that. Or rather, let's theorize on the greater force that's influencing the more notorious parts of Sumeru's story. But before that, thank you to Opera GX for sponsoring this video. Opera GX is the first ever browser built specifically for gamers, and my personal go-to browser with its many features that I use when playing tabletops or just researching videos. So I'm super excited to show you guys the stuff I use so my PC doesn't die! They actually released a new feature called the pinboards. Pinboards are a new way of sorting links, notes, tabs, and other things. You can also customize the pinboard to be whatever layout you want, and even make multiples of them. Plus, you can share them online if you do want to share your sus links with anyone. Anyway, speaking of customization and organization, here's my personal favorite features that I use a lot since I like opening tabs all at once. You can customize your browser to any display aesthetic you want, like if you want forced dark mode or animated wallpapers and themes. Workspaces is also a quick and convenient way of sorting tabs, if you don't like having to close them to clean them up. Kind of like a tab folder you just have on the side and switch really quickly from. And another feature I personally love are the built-in VPNs and ad blocker that I use when going into shady sites for Genshin art. Anyway, and last but certainly not the least is the GX cleaner that I use for optimizing. The stuff I do online tends to eat a lot of browser speed since I have a lot of tabs open or I have a lot of tabletop RPG boards open, so this really helps in making sure that nothing of my browser games lag. It clears up unwanted cookies or caches or downloads you don't need just to improve your browsing experience. So go on right ahead and download Opera GX with the link down below. And feel free to tell me what your favorite personal features are in Opera GX, and thank you to Opera GX for sponsoring this video. And with that, let's begin. Disclaimer: I won't be going over Dottore's history entirely as a character, but instead as a harbinger. Though I am hearing and seeing a lot of theories about Dottore's past. But for today's theory, let's dive into the role of Dottore as the overarching figure that puppets Sumeru's governance. I theorized the following. Dottore is trying to harness the power of the Dendro Archon fully by researching the power of the Irminsul to essentially bring back full corporeal versions of memories, essentially playing into the reality-bending potential that dreams and imaginations can have. And his goal of burning the Irminsul is tied to the eventual downfall of Sumeru's strongest connection with the ley lines, and cutting off the power of Nahida as the Dendro Archon, which essentially keeps the power hostage and making it so that the Fatui are the only ones with that control. And that will be done by puppeteering the two diametrically opposed factions in Sumeru that share one astute goal. And what is that goal? Reviving their dead gods. Alright, that's a huge info dump, so let's break it down. We need to open this theory with the most important actions that Dottore is taking right now, which could explain the dream harvesting and the other recent lore pieces we've been seeing. So number 1, Dottore is trying to harness the power of the Dendro Archon and the power to transfer information by harnessing one's memories. The reality-bending potential of the Dendro Archon was showcased to us in the second part of the Archon quest, and those that can control this power will surely be crowned as god. From what we've seen in previous patches, the Fatui have established plans that involve dreams and mirages. According to the 2.8 event quest with Kazuha, Mona, Fischl, and Shinyan, the Fatui have been experimenting with mirages and illusions by harnessing the power of a god, more specifically, the Dendro Archon. While at the time it was never truly specified if it was Kusanali's power, we can infer that this was a shared ability by both the Greater and by extension the Lesser Lord, given that Kusanali is the successor. What's actually fascinating is that the Fatui officials allegedly did not approve of the research for the machine in 2.8. The research wasn't made by any branch of the Harbingers, but instead Persikov, a sickly researcher we met on the island. This machine wasn't approved by the Fatui higher-ups, but it still had Fatui influences because the juniors were the ones that experimented with this machine. What I am curious about is if the machine found its way to the Harbingers. I highly doubt that the Fatui Harbingers do not have any information about this machine, especially for how advanced it was in harnessing the power of Dendro, and most especially since Persikov already opened this information to them. So my theory is that this machine wasn't necessarily approved by the Fatui officials, but that doesn't mean they weren't interested. Because if they were really against this research, they would have sent agents and assassins to formally kill the researcher and purge the entirety of his work. They have the resources for this. And with how obsessed the Fatui are with celestial-related research, not allowing the research of a machine that can alter brains and harness the power of an Archon even better than that of a Gnosis is such a waste. No. What I'm willing to bet is that the Fatui officials didn't openly approve of it for the sole purpose of baiting rogue and disobedient juniors to test this machine out. What I'm speculating had happened is that the Harbingers are very much aware of what this machine does, and that juniors are going to this mysterious island to conduct the research. But instead of stopping them entirely, they decided to test this machine out and see the adverse effects. It's like getting a free experiment without doing all the dirty work themselves. If the experiment succeeds, they have a fully functioning machine that allows for cognitive manipulation. Now, the reason I believe that Dottore's purpose of research has something to do with revival is because of the notes in the Deepwood Memories. An excerpt between three friends is recorded in the artifacts, and a passage in the end assumes the perspective of an unknown researcher who was kicked out of the academia. But those souls that have been destroyed by death, memories that are eternally lost, is there a place for them in the circle of life and death? The soul is a void concept, and memories must one day return to the land. What is there to worry about if something that was always void were to fade away? Rather, remind and support one another, such that everyone's image will be remembered forever. Thus shall we defeat the natural circle of life and death, and preserve memory forever.
If the organ that governs memory has taken too much damage and cannot be healed, then bring another friend and dwell in dreams of the past together. Play in a small treehouse and explore the limitless depths of the jungle. But first, those dream spirits must be captured. Those sellswords once did much for me. I trust that they will not disappoint this time either.
The first conversation is from the three friends, or more specifically, the three gods of Sumeru, the Greater Lord Rukkhadevata, the Scarlet King, and the Goddess of Flowers. Alternatively, the story shifts to a first-person point of view of Dottore speaking. From the context of this, Dottore's plan is to replace the old vessel of dreams with another one. This can either be through succession, or simply through transferring. Maybe he's trying to harness the power of the three gods, and storing the reality-altering power of Dendro into another vessel, something that he calls an old friend of the original organ. The purpose of reminding that friend once again of one's own form and memories could mean that there is a body or a soul somewhere in Sumeru that needs to be revived back to their old state, whether it is for good or for bad. And this is where I tie in the next part of this theory. The burning of the Irminsul tree is done to cut off Kusanali's power and manipulate Sumeru's largest stash of knowledge. There are two questions that I have with the purpose of Dottore burning the Irminsul tree down, beside it being just for blasphemy. Clearly, the Fatui have no real care for the Sumeru citizens, or the people that are working there. So selfishness wouldn't be out of the question. So first is, why burn down the Irminsul? At first I thought that it would just be to stop the flow of information within the Akasha terminals and plunge the whole of Sumeru into chaos by removing their biggest source of knowledge. But now that I think about it, there has to be a deeper motivation, because why burn the largest source of knowledge in Tevat without fully understanding it? But then it hit me. It's the largest public source of knowledge. If what I said was true, and that they were trying to harness the power of dreams and information for themselves, then burning this tree would be a way of monopolizing the knowledge for their own benefits. Think of it like this, that Fatui would have an iron grip on Sumeru if they first harness all the information they can from the Akasha and the Irminsul, store it into a separate vessel, then purge the tree altogether, despite just randomly burning the tree as it is. Not only will they cripple the source, but they will also make Sumeru fundamentally dependent on the Fatui and Snezhnaya if Dottore proposes that the Fatui have an alternative. But the second question is, what does this have to do with Kusanali's power? Well, the Dendro Archon quest hints that Kusanali's power isn't entirely her own, but that Dendro power is most concentrated in the Irminsul. So it's possible that if you destroy the Irminsul, you cut off a portion of Kusanali's power. Similar to what happens when you lose the Gnosis. Because honestly, I think out of all the Archons we've seen so far, Kusanali is the one that has the most defined power set Archon-wise. You know, the godly power versions of them that don't just control the elements, but rather the abstract of those elements. But whether or not Dottore will succeed is unknown. But last and certainly not the least is my biggest claim for this theory. The Fatui is puppeteering two diametrically opposed factions in Sumeru, the Sumeru Academia Sages and the Ain al-Ahmar, and my proposed motivation? The resurrection of the respective gods. Let's start with the Ain al-Ahmar and what possible relationship they have with the Fatui. The connection between the Fatui and the Eremites was already hinted in the Deepwood Memories dialogue at the end. Quote, "Those sellswords once did much for me." Sellswords is another way for mercenaries, so unless there's another faction entirely, I highly doubt that this isn't a reference to Eremites. Now, granted, there are a lot of subdivisions under the Eremites, but I theorize it's because of their fanaticism that the Fatui would want them. The promise of resurrecting the Scarlet King is too big. While the Fatui have henchmen already, having the Eremites as a secondary faction is crucial, because that means they have the information on the Old Kingdom that the Scarlet King had. On the other hand, manipulation of the sages benefit the Fatui because of the amount of resources and freedom they gain from being associates of the government, similar to how the Fatui have always operated. Like in Mondstadt, it was the Knights of Favonius, Liyue with the Liyue Chising, and the Tenryo Commission in Inazuma. This is standard because the Fatui call themselves diplomats. But another benefit is that the Fatui would have access to the Akasha Terminal and the manipulation of people's dreams. Subsequently, they can easily use the research that they got from 2.8 into the Akasha Terminal and conduct a nationwide experiment, similar to the Sub-Zero Samsara we saw. This kind of dream is nothing different from the other events we've been seeing in the Golden Apple Archipelago, just that breaking down between dream and reality is borderline impossible without Kusanali's intervention. And why would the Academia partner themselves with the Fatui? Well, we are aware that their allegiance isn't to Kusanali, but instead to Greater Lord Rukkhadevata. Consider this. If the Fatui had found a way to convince them that the Irminsul is key to resurrecting their old god, do you not think they'll consider this premonition? The ultimate question that was lingering in the Sumeru Archon Quest Part 1 is why in the world was Sumeru harvesting dreams to begin with? While there are so many theories given by the characters, there's no conclusive statement except that they might be pulling together the consciousness of all the masses to create the ultimate combination of knowledge. Like, again, a hive mind. So what if they're planning to recreate the reality of Sumeru? Back to the time that Greater Lord Rukkhadevata established the Golden Age of Sumeru and its academia. The possibilities of this research are unfortunately very endless, so I cannot for certain say why in the world the sages will partner up with the Fatui. I'm just speculating at this point. But yes, that's it for me today. I do genuinely believe that what Dottore has planned in Sumeru is much bigger than the ones I've stated in this video, and I could be completely wrong. Who knows? Anyway, my name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me. Also, thank you to OperaGX for sponsoring this video. Anyway, I'll see you all next time. Goodbye!